morning. I am Professor Tiffany Tillman. I'm an instructor in the Law and Justice Department here at Rowan, and I'm also the program coordinator for Liberal Studies and American Studies. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to our panelists for taking time to join us today. Most of the students in the room are students in my criminal justice research methods class, and I shared with some of our panelists that one of the things we've been focusing on this semester, we've been looking at historical examples of unethical experimentation, and then that has led us to discuss why we have ethical codes and the importance of ethics in research today. So for my students, we are very lucky to be hearing from our panelists, and to everyone else here, I just want to welcome you and thank you again. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Blank to do formal introductions.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Blank. I am the director for the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies, and I really want to welcome you to this panel. This is called Echoes of Ethics, Unveiling the History and Legacy of the Holmesburg Prison Experiment. This event is sponsored by the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies, the College of Humanities, Social Sciences, Liberal Studies, and American Studies. Professor Tillman is a coordinator of those programs, so I've really enjoyed working with her. Law and Justice, History, Sociology, and Philosophy. Nothing as a professor is better than when your students teach you something you didn't know. And I got to do that last semester. I had Bria Terrell in my historical methods class, and she wanted to learn more about an experience that happened to her grandfather and write about that. And she told me about what happened in Holmesburg prison, and I was like, oh, that is really important, really interesting. I didn't think that happened after the Tuskegee experiments, and my eyes were really opened by Bria telling me all about that. And so I really wanted to share this with the Rowan community, so Bria helped me get in touch with not only her grandfather, but this really great panel of people, and I really appreciate you coming and talking with us. And this is just so important because until we learn about what happened in the past, it's hard to avoid doing the same kinds of mistakes. And so what you're going to learn about is really, really important. And especially if you're looking to go into criminal justice, thinking about how you can prevent, avoid, stop things like this from happening is really what human rights is about, and protecting our communities and our people and that we live in. So thank you for being on that path to doing that, and I hope you really enjoy this presentation. Bria is going to do some introductions to let us know who our panelists are, and then we'll move along.
I'm going to start by introducing Adrianne Jones-Alston. Adrianne Jones-Alston is a distinguished advocate and the oldest daughter of Leodus Jones, a survivor of the infamous and unethical Holmesburg prison experiment. A proud Philadelphia native, Adrianne has dedicated her life to championing justice and healing for underserved communities. As the founder and president of the Jones Foundation for Returning Citizens, Adrianne leads transformative efforts to support reentry communities, advance mental health healing, and confront systemic injustices. Through her leadership, the foundation became a beacon of hope and empowerment, creating pathways for individuals to rebuild their lives and thrive. A former student of the Germanna College in Virginia, Adrianne has played a pivotal role in the global advancement of restorative justice initiatives for Holmesburg prison experiments. She works tirelessly alongside survivors, their families, and academic institutions to achieve reparative justice and raise awareness about the historical and ongoing impacts of unethical research practices. Her collaboration with experts culminated in the creation of the Holmesburg Prison Experiment Restorative Justice Initiative Classroom Module, an educational tool designed to inspire action and reflection among students and communities worldwide. Adrianne's unwavering commitment to community empowerment and education reforms drives her advocacy, making a powerful voice for those healing from institutional trauma. Throughout her work, she honors her father's legacy and continues to challenge the status quo, ensuring a more just and compassionate world for generations of the future. Now I'm going to read Alan Hornblum's bio. Alan Hornblum has served as in official government positions over the years. He was the Chief of Staff of Pennsylvania Sheriff Office, the Pennsylvania Crime Commission, charged with investigating organized crime and corruption in the Commonwealth, the Board of Trustees of the Philadelphia Prison System, Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. In conjunction with officials in academic duties, Hornblum has inspected prison systems both domestic and foreign, including San Quentin, WSP Walla Walla, Stillwater, Segatoville, Rikers Island, Pentonville, Mount Joy, Strangeways, Lasante, and Regensburg. Allen taught at Temple University from 1982 to 2008. He taught at the Philadelphia prison system during the 1970s. Allen is also an author of the following books: Acres of Skin, Confessions of a Second-Story Man, Sentenced to Science, The Invisible Harry Gold, Against Their Will, American Colossus, The Klondike Bake Oven, and The Klondike Bake Oven Depths. Hornblum's books have received international attention, including being featured on national news shows such as Good Morning America, CBS News, Evening News, CBS News, Court TV, BBC, and Deutsche Welle. He is also one of the few authors to have a book earn coverage in one of the front pages of the New York Times and the Philadelphia Inquirer. The Invisible Harry Gold.
You don't have to go, Bree. You don't have to go into all that. I was told we have to be out of here by 3 o'clock, so we don't have that much time. So you can just move on.
Okay.
Well, he's very distinguished.
Thank you.
So we're going to start with Alan. Do you want? And you have your microphone right there. Stand there and speak, right? Yep.
First of all, I want to thank Bria because it's because of her that we're doing this, and because there was a very receptive professor on campus, which you don't always find, and another accepting professor, Tiffany and Emily. I want to thank you guys because this is a story that should be taught. Folks should know, but it's not. So Adrianne and I very much appreciate when we get an institution of higher learning that reaches out to bring us on campus, because this is a very, very dark story. It's a dark episode in American medical and correctional history, and unfortunately there are too many faculty members and institutions that would rather not touch it. So you're going to hear things today that you've never heard before, and you may not ever again, because unfortunately there are too many schools and faculty that are risk adverse and don't want to touch stories such as this. And one very brief example, when I and Eddie Anthony, another former test subject, gave a talk at St. Joe's University in Philly, it was a very nice crowd like this. We had a number of folks from the community there. There were two elderly gentlemen there. And they came up to me afterwards. They introduced themselves as doctors, white doctors in their 60s. They had never heard of Tuskegee syphilis study. They wanted to know what it was. What that underscores is the fact that ethics is the caboose of medical education. And maybe it's changing, but really at a glacial pace. And I want to say I was never down here. It looks like a very nice campus and facilities and all this food here. Adrianne and I and her husband may not leave to help polish this off. But when I did come down here, quite frankly, I thought maybe I was on the wrong day, and it was Sunday, because I got down here early and it was like 8:15 and there was nothing going on. And I thought, wow, this looks like a weekend. At Temple, I had the unfortunate honor of teaching a lot of 8 o'clock classes, and everything is jumping. But obviously, the culture down here in South Jersey is a little bit different. I think that's an advancement. So you should be pleased with that. But this is a real challenge for me because I've been told I only have 10 minutes. And that's a hell of a challenge since I've written 3 books on the subject, a bunch of articles, and a lot of presentations. So I'm not sure where to start, but I'm going to move very quickly. And then if you have questions later after we've all spoken, maybe I can get a chance to address those. I entered this philosophical medical arena not much older than you are right now. I had just picked up a master's degree in history at Villanova. And before going on for a PhD, I thought I would do some progressive work in the community, here or there. And I was really looking for the Peace Corps, and things got messed up, unfortunately, and they lost my application. And finally, they told me, yes, we have a spot for you in Botswana. But by then, I had made other plans, what have you. So I decided I'm going to try and do, back then we called it the third world in America. I chose the Philly prison system. And when I walked in the Philly jails, the 3 jails of Holmesburg, House of Correction Detention Center, all on State Road up in northeast Philadelphia, if you've ever been up that way, I was absolutely shocked by a lot of things, if you've never been in a prison before. How many people have been in prison? How many have been in prison but don't want to acknowledge it? Okay. You visited prison. They didn't keep you overnight. One of the very stark things I saw were scores and scores of inmates strapped and wrapped in bandages and adhesive tape. Their heads, their arms, their shoulders. And if you've ever seen the cover of my book, you see this inmate sitting on a table talking to a physician with patches on his back. And that was very, very common throughout the jail. And I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know what I was looking at, but it looked like they had all been in a hell of a knife fight in the exercise yard, battle on the cell block. I couldn't imagine what was going on because every other inmate had medical tape on them. I asked the guard the next day, what's going on here? Is this place that unsafe? And he just kidded with me and joked. Thought it was funny that I was reacting that way, but he said, Mr. Hornblum, don't worry about it. That's just the perfume test for the University of Pennsylvania. You can imagine my shock to hear that their perfume tests being tested on criminals by the University of Pennsylvania, this elite institution. So I had a very hard time digesting that. Asked him a lot of questions. It went on for a while. He got very tired of me because that practice of using inmates as test subjects had been going on for over 2 decades. By the time I get there in 71, and I'm not much older than you, all 3 jails are doing tests on inmates, and Holmesburg probably had 75% of the inmates on the tests. They weren't there. They weren't participating to advance science. They weren't interested in advancing the progress of the war in Vietnam. They weren't doing it because they were altruists. They were doing it for money. It was the only way to make money in a jail. If you were lucky enough to get a job pushing a broom on a cell block, you may have made 25 cents, 50 cents a day. But if you were a guinea pig, you could make $1 a day. $1.50 a day. If you went in the Army experiments, which were very notorious in the jail, you could make serious money, $2 a jail. But you could come out of those trailers not knowing your name, where you were, who your relatives were, and they had to put a patch on your shirt identifying you as a test subject for the Army and the University of Pennsylvania. So things were happening in the Philly jail that were not taking place anyplace else in the country. Yes, experiments were happening in different prisons, but nothing like the Philly system. And that is because a very prominent dermatologist named Albert Kligman and a very elite university, the University of Pennsylvania. So if you were an entrepreneur, if you were a business, if you were the military, you wanted something tested, something that was dangerous, you went to Philly. Not because we had good pizzas or nice soft pretzels or Norman Van Brocklin throwing passes to Tommy McDonald, because that prison system became known in the field of human experimentation, the place to go if you want to test something that is very risky and dangerous. I'll give you some examples. Withers Pontins, inmate I tracked down when I'm doing my research in the 1990s on this story. He's doing a life bit at Graterford Prison, and he takes off his shirt. He shows me his back. He's got all sorts of discolorations on his back and little notches and scars. He was repeatedly used as a test subject for different lotions, ointments, biopsies, what have you. And he also showed me 2 scars on each side, just above his hip, 2 inches long. And they bring him down. They said, we have an experiment. We're going to give you a little bit more money. Are you interested? He, of course, said yes. He's from Pittsburgh. He doesn't have any money. Nobody's sending him anything. He wants money for commissary. So they put him on a table. They slice him open. They put a gauze pad in there, and then they stitch him up. Then they do the other side, the same thing. 2-inch slices on each side above his hip. Put in gauze pad, stitch him up, send him on his way. Bring him back the next week, open up one side, take out the gauze pad, restitch him, bring him back the next week, take out the pad on the other side. Never explained to him what the purpose was, what it was for, what the impact could be, but he just knew that he got $50. You know, he said $25 a slice. That's the way he explained it. Withers Pontins. Another inmate, Roy Williams. Roy Williams, you can probably find on the YouTube. Roy Williams, heavyweight boxer. Philly boy, when I met him, 6'5", 400 pounds. Big guy, very intimidating. But in his youth, he was 6'5", 250. He was a heavyweight prize fighter, a very good one. He got in the top 10. He fought some of the biggest names in the field, including maybe Brea's relative. Your last, it's Terrell? There used to be a boxer named Ernie Terrell, was a heavyweight boxer, but he fought him. The point was, Roy Williams was in prison before he becomes famous as a top flight boxer. He's doing time. He doesn't have any money. He wants to get something out of commissary. Like many inmates, you're afraid of the experiments, but you like the idea of money, so you try to find one that is very safe. He thought that this experiment they were describing to inmates, where they were dealing with shampoo, would be very simple, safe, no problem. Well, the doctor wasn't quite yet a doctor. He was a medical student working for Dr. Kligman in the prison, applies this, what he thought was shampoo on his head, and within days, his hair starts to fall out. Big clumps of hair are coming out, and one thing you do not want is a 6'5", 250-pound heavyweight mad at you. And when he confronted the doctor, who I also tracked down as a major cancer specialist decades later in Chicago, he said it was one of the most frightening times of his life because the inmate pushed him up against the wall and said, "Look what you did to my head." So that's another example of a type of experiment that went on there. Was it shampoo? Was it something? The inmates do not know. They were never told. They were treated the same way as doctors treat lab rats or mice or dogs in a laboratory. There are so many other examples that I could give you of individuals. Here's one, a very quick one. William Harper was an inmate working for Kligman as a recruiter of test subjects. They offered him, Kligman offered him the opportunity to make serious money, $100 with an experiment. What was the experiment? Take a piece out of his lower lip, reattach it to his bicep. Cut a piece out of his bicep and attach it to his lip. As some of you are looking at me now, hard to believe, wincing, he reacted the same way, but the doctor convinced him it would be easy, there wouldn't be any problem, he'd get all the pain meds he want, and he'd also get $50. William Harper, as when I met him years later, had a very large discoloration on his lip and showed me part of his lip on his arm. Kligman was doing skin transplantation experiments. Inmates hardly knew at all what was taking place. To give you one last example, not of an individual, but of a certain type of experiment that takes place. Around 1963, there's a problem at the Dow Chemical Company in Midland, Michigan. Everybody knows Dow Chemical, one of the biggest names in the field. They've got a problem in a factory. What's the problem? A number of their workers are coming down with chloracne, a very, very nasty form of pimples and blackheads that you're obviously exposed to a toxic substance. The workers go on strike. They don't want to enter that building anymore. Something's wrong. The leaders of Dow Chemical management go to their physicians, their doctors, their scientists, and said, what the hell's causing this? We've got a hell of a problem now. We don't have workers in the factory. We can't get the product out. They're making a herbicide that's sold all around the country, probably here in South Jersey as well. So they tell their physicians, figure it out and rectify it. The doctors are smart in Michigan. They're not just, doctors in Jersey or Pennsylvania. They're smart up there. They think they know what the problem is. A byproduct of the herbicide, a white powder, is extremely toxic. What is it? Dioxin. A very, very toxic substance that then becomes infamous a few years later because that's what they're dropping on the Vietnamese in the war in Southeast Asia. And a lot of American soldiers claim that problems that they had years later emanate from being exposed to that substance. The doctors put the dioxin on the ears of rabbits, and lo and behold, there's a reaction as they suspected. It was that white powder. Yes, the dioxin was the agent that was causing all these problems, causing chloracne. But management of Dow wants something more than that. They want the real deal. What's the real deal? Humans. They don't want reactions from rabbits, reactions from humans. Where do you go to test something nasty on people? Right, you go to Philly. So they came to Philly because of what were the three things I said they came? Bria, you're taking notes. What were the three things? Who knows? Come on. The prisons in Philly, the University of Pennsylvania, and Dr. Kligman. That's the three-legged stool that propagated this horrendous process for 25 years, the experiments that were taking place. So they contact Kligman. They offer him a contract for a good bit of money. For the first time ever, dioxin is purposefully, scientifically applied to humans. Takes place in Philly in the mid-1960s, and lo and behold, several dozen inmates show up with chloracne. The initial protocol is very conservative. That doesn't mean that it was endorsed by the Republicans and Ronald Reagan. It means that those doctors knew that that substance is so toxic, so carcinogenic, that the most minute amount should be used on an individual. Kligman follows it. There's no reaction. He's upset because he's a man of action. He wanted to see some positive traces of skin breakout. So he informs Dow, and he says, I'm sorry, there was no reaction, but let's not drop it. Let's consider, doing it again. Dow says, okay, we're going to consider doing a second series of tests. But while he's waiting to get the okay from Dow, on his own, he decides to go through with another series of tests, increasing the dosage, not doubling it, not tripling it, not quadrupling it. He increased it 478 times, thereby guaranteeing there would be a reaction on inmates who never knew, were never told what was being put on their faces and their backs. Now, I could go on until football season talking about other examples that took place in Philly. But if you want to read about it, you can pick up the book Acres of Skin, or if you're not a good reader, you can pick up the documentary, Acres of Skin, the documentary. I think you can cheat and find it on YouTube. There's a couple other books that I'd recommend. One that I wrote on Edward Anthony, who was an inmate who went through hell in a half dozen experiments. And then if you really want to get upset, you can pick up Against Their Will, that I did with a couple of colleagues. This is the history of using institutionalized children as guinea pigs for medical experiments, and some of it starts just south of here. In Vineland and Woodbine is where Dr. Albert Kligman first started to do human experiments using children who back then were called retarded and considered waste and throwaways. And Kligman traveled from West Philly, where Penn is at, down here to then do experiments on 4, 5, 6-year-old kids at Vineland and Woodbine, which were then called the New Jersey State Colonies for the Feeble-Minded. A lot of this emanates from the eugenics movement, and a lot of people bought into it, which is the reason why I believe so much of this happened around the country, and nobody really blew a whistle on it until finally Tuskegee is aired in 1972. This is really a very dark chapter of American medical history. They don't want to talk about it. They'd rather not be pressed on it. And it is the reason, as Emily said earlier, why rules, regulations, and ethics are so important. Because I saw it for myself, what was taking place when you don't stress that. And when I went to Woodbine and Vineland to track down people and look at those institutions, I met parents there who, when I told them what once happened here, they said, absolutely not. That did not occur. And I said, it absolutely did occur, and I've got the documents to show you. They were absolutely stunned and staggered by it. So a lot of things have taken place. Things will continue to take place, and as you guys go out in the real world, and maybe even now, you'll see some things, and you may want to question what you see. So I've taken more than my 10 minutes, which means I'll probably be only able to escape with 1 or 2 donuts here. But I want to turn it over to Adrianne or Herb. Okay. Herb was also in jail with me. I don't think we knew each other at the time. But Herb was one of those on the front lines on the cell block who knew what was occurring in there, and I won't steal any of his thunder. I'll let Herb Rice tell you what the jails were like and why so many inmates decided to become test subjects.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right.
He has a microphone right in front.
Is that okay?
Yes, I was at Holmesburg from 1968 to 1969. Prior to that, when I first came to Holmesburg, it was 1963. I was 18 years old. You had to be, you really had to know how to defend yourself when you went to Holmesburg prison. It was a terror dome. You know, people got stabbed every day. Somebody got raped. You know, it was, you had to really man up in that place. I guess I didn't have that problem to some sort because at 12 years old, I learned how to box. So I was like an amateur boxer when I got there. So I was tried and tested, you know. So one day, me and a guy was walking down the block, and we went out on what they call the center control, and I seen this guy with cups on his head. So I said, Ed, what is that on that guy's head? He said, oh man, they shoot, what he said? They shoot stuff into his brain. And he said it so candidly, like it was an everyday occurrence. So that was kind of brief, because I only was there about a month. But when I came back in 68, I went to a block. I had no money, no nothing. So my friends that was there, they had a thing called a care package. They would send you cigarettes, underarm deodorant, things that you really needed. So I had that. So a couple of days later, he came back and said, "Herb, you want to make some money?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, I'm going to get you transferred over to my block." And that block at Holmesburg Prison was called H Block. H Block was all the tests were given. And they used to call it the money block. So I guess maybe about 4 or 5 days later, they transferred me over to H Block. And that's when all hell broke loose in a psychological way. I was put on the block. And I had a habit of knowing people. 3 or 4 of the guards I had went to school with. So the block was real funny. It was no fighting, stabbing, none of that homosexual stuff. Because if it did, you got put off the block. So everybody wanted to stay on that block to make that money. So I'm trying to get to where I want to go here. I guess after about 3 or 4 days, the guys came up and said, "Hey, Herb, come on down front." So they went down front. So the test that I got on was a detergent test. They would put your hand in a latex glove with some type of solution until your hands wrinkled up, So that lasted about 2-3 days. I got paid for that. So the next test, I think, was a diet test. You got a milkshake 3 times a day with a little waffle. And that was see that if they can maintain your weight without you losing weight. So I went through that, nothing happened. Then I stepped up a little bit. They called me down and told me they wanted to put 4 circles on my back, and it was a radiation study. And so I heard this click, 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 and they kept doing that until my skin looked like the color that it was just that white. They took all the melanin out of my skin, and then they used some type of salve to bring it back. Yeah. So then I took one of the dangerous studies was they made 4 incisions on each side of my rib cage. And they sewed me up with these different threads, blue, orange, brown. And what I found out later was they did that to see if I would get infected, because that's when it was coming out with scrubs. Because back at that time, everything was all white in the operating room. And they wanted to try these colors to see if a person would get infected. So I was one of the guys that they did that on. So I never got infected, got on that. Then the one that changed my life, the metabolic test. That's when they would take a foreign organism and put it in your body without you knowing what's going to happen and without them knowing what's going to happen. And what they did was they took me off the block, me and some other inmates, and put us on the hospital block. And they observed us for about 3 days, and we took these pills twice a day. And they observed to see if we would go through any changes. So nothing happened then. But as I recall it, as I recall it now, excuse me, they put me on a test, and I went back to the block, and nothing happened right away. But maybe about, I'm just speculating now, maybe about 2-3 months later, I had took some other little tests, but they wasn't dangerous or nothing. Then I started feeling funny mentally. You know, I didn't feel like myself. I just felt strange. I just couldn't pinpoint nothing. One of the guards, who I was very close to, me and him was talking, and I snapped out. I mean, I didn't physically snap out. I started calling him all kind of names and stuff. And inside, I could hear myself saying, "Herb, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? What are you doing?" And you know, and I stopped. I just tried to stop myself from what I was doing. And then he said, "You all right, man? You all right?" And I'm saying, yeah. But what happened was a sergeant seen it. And he came down there and took over. They took me off the block and locked me up in the hole for 3 days. Now, when you go to the hole in Holmesburg prison at that time, the windows was in the ceiling, and they took black tar and painted over that so you didn't know it was there at night. Then, when you went in the cell, they gave you a roll of toilet paper, a mattress that was of plastic if it was in the summertime, where you would sweat, and then they would give you a horsehair in the wintertime where you would scratch yourself to damn near death. And you got one meal a day, and that one meal had all 3 meals on it: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they gave it to you in a collapsible plate. So when it made in your hand, it was so hot, it would fall to the floor, and you had to eat off the floor. They brought me back to the block. They didn't put me off. But I got on some other tests, and I can't remember what they were, because I kept going in and out. So before I knew it, I knew something strange was going on with me. You know, I started snapping out on people, you know, my friends, you know, and I started getting into fights, real serious fights, you know. Then the Holmesburg riot jumped off. As a result of that, I was one of the men that was transferred out of the jail to Eastern State Penitentiary, which I had a short stay there, and then they sent me to Graterford. When I got to Graterford, I got in so much trouble, it was a shame. I mean, it even today, I said, that didn't make sense. I know I wasn't making sense. As I know it today, I knew I wasn't making sense. I was damn near out of my mind. You know what I mean? As I can look at it in retrospect, I changed just like that. And my life didn't get like that until I took them pills. You know, prior to them pills, I was okay. When I took them pills, not only did my life change, well, I'll get to that later. Well, when I got up there, I kept getting in trouble. So they sent me home. The biggest mistake they could have made. I didn't stay on the street for 4 months. I didn't stay on the street 4 months. Then I was right back. You know, I was right back on H block again. You know, got on some other studies, but they wasn't like dangerous, but they scarred me, you know, physically. I mean, yeah, physically it kind of scarred me, but not mentally like the other stuff did. So again, I was sent back to Graterford, and I came. What happened was, I was getting in trouble. one of the guards told me that I was going to see the parole board the next morning. So I got with the guys on my block, and they gave me a party. And we was drinking jailhouse hooch, they call it, and I got drunk. And I went in front of the parole board, and they was talking to me, and I told them to go to hell. You know, so when they took me out of there and put me on a hole, I knew that was it. But what they did was, about 2 weeks later, they came and said they was transferring me. So they took me out of Greater Ford, and I'm thinking I'm going to another penitentiary, and they took me to Eagleville Rehabilitation. Because they said, the parole board said, for a man to do what you did, you got a problem. You know, and that's where they sent me. And that was in 1973. So I started getting myself together, but I wouldn't tell nobody about these dreams. And like, I would have dreams like doctors chasing me with uniforms and needles and bizarre. You know, I wouldn't tell nobody. I was scared to open that up, you know, because people would say I'm crazy. And I was crazy. You know, I was going through some stuff, man. And so I stayed there at Eagleville in Norristown from January until like about April, because I had a job, everything was going good. And I came back to Philly and started associating with the same guys, and I started doing the same stuff again. You know, they're selling drugs, doing this, doing that, you know, and eventually they caught me in '74, and I stayed in lockup till 1976. Now, I don't know how that happened, but in 1976 was the last time I ever went to jail. And I didn't change much from what I was doing. I'll just say that was the grace of God, you know. And I was really, and I got hurt. One time, I got an argument with this guy in the street, and he pulled a gun on me and shot me in the head. It didn't go in my head, it creased my head. You know, and then another guy stabbed me with a 7-inch butcher knife in my side, and it came out my stomach. Never touched the organ. Yeah. And then I was in the bar with my father, you know, and something came over me that said, he never did nothing for you, nothing. And he said, well, he's your father. And I verbally attacked him, you know, and he left the bar and came back and shot me. He shot me in a, when they took me to the hospital, the doctor told me that the only reason why I was living, it wasn't because of the medical thing, because I got 2 pellets in my heart as I'm standing there. By right, I'm supposed to be dead. You know, I just went through all kind of stuff that I brought on myself. Then my godfather got me a job, believe it or not, with the city of Philadelphia. But he was a committeeman, so he could do a couple of things for me. And I really didn't want the job. I wanted to stay out there in that corner and just act a damn fool. So I took the job, I got the job, I kept the job. But I kept going all through this mental stuff the whole time. And I mean, this was, I ain't talking about for months now, I'm talking about years. This is years I'm going through this. You know, waking up screaming, you know, man, it's like a horror story. You know, in 19, what was it? 19, God, I think it was in 1986 or somewhere around there, man. I experienced my first mental institution. And that's when they said that I was bipolar. Not to say I wasn't, but I knew there was more stuff going on other than this damn bipolar, and it had been going on for years. But I never told them. I never opened my mouth. I never told them about the pills, nothing. I just kept that secret. So 3 of my buddies I ran into, and we was all on that medication test. And we used to call each other and talk about it, you know what I mean? And those were the only guys I would talk to. And I was the only guy they would talk to. Within a 3-year time, one hung himself, the other guy put a gun in his mouth, and the other guy they found decomposed in an empty house. And my 3 contacts was dead, you know. And so I wound up going to 3 mental institutions. And I never told them about Holmesburg prison. It was just too shameful. It's kind of hard to explain. Like, I just couldn't talk about it, you know? And to update it, I was home one day and my TV went out. So a friend of mine said, I know somebody who can fix it. So the guy came over my house and me and him got to talking while he was fixing the television. And then he said, yeah, man, when I was in Holmesburg prison. I said, Holmesburg prison? When? And he got to tell me when. And then he said, yeah, man, I met this lady that gave me $200 to talk about Holmesburg prison. I said, give me a number. You know, so I called the lady. There she is. You know, and she was God sent, because where I am today is because of her. See, I couldn't talk about this, and when I did, I started. It was like regurgitating some type of poison, you know. And for the past few years, my life has gotten better, you know, as I talk about this stuff. But it wasn't like that in the beginning, you know. And I'm talking about 55 years I've been going through this crap. You know, I just happened to add it up one day. I said, oh my God. One thing I wanted to say about H-Block. When they gave the LSD test was given by the United States Army. So I heard they was paying $200 and some. So I went down there, and when I got down there, was a note on the door that said, please wait, went to lunch. So I'm only sitting there waiting, and like I got my back turned, and I heard this guy say, hey, young buck, and he shocked me. So when I turned around, he said, man, don't take the test. And his eyes was going like that. I said, what the hell? He scared me. So I said, oh yeah, all right. And I didn't take that test. And see, people that was on the LSD test, they used to put them on you call it the pay me no mind list, because they did strange things. As long as they ain't hurt an inmate or themselves or a guard, their behavior was accepted. Some guys used to walk around the center control trying to erase the yellow line, and they used to let them do it. Some guys used to go in the yard and just stand there and just shake for an hour. You know, it had all kind of stuff. You know, yeah, it was no joke. I'm so glad to be where I'm at today. if it wasn't for the Jones Foundation. But there's a lot of men out there that still don't want to talk about this, and they're locked up mentally, and I know how that feels. So I feel as though I'm speaking for the unspoken, and thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everyone. So, yeah, we've been going around to different colleges and talk about this kind of stuff, and it just doesn't get easier to hear. But yeah, it's my grandfather, as you know. And yeah, he was a beacon in my childhood, like my childhood self. Like I still, remember him from, I'm like this high, and yeah, he just comes around. He's like funny, tells jokes, gives you like $3 for no reason. It's just cool. It's all fun, laugh, jokes. I go over to his house, and he had a son after I was born, so that's my uncle technically. So like me and him are like, we're like this. So, it was good. It was fun. I'm growing up. Eventually, as I get older, I start going over to his house a little less. But it was so fun there. Like, he made the best pancakes, all this. Now my dad doesn't want me to go over there as much anymore. I never knew why. Slowly, I stopped going over there as much, and then my uncle would just come to my house. Never knew why. Like, as I'm in like the teenager phase, I'm like going to the doctors, whatever, taking acne medicine, stuff like that, and then, just like, it's just a fleeting memory, basically. And yeah, we never like disconnected or anything like that, but like over time, like I would hear more and more, like overhear conversations of when Pop-Up was crazy. The phrase "Pop-Up was when Pop-Up went crazy." At some point, I never got the whole story, but different people in my family would say something about a point where he was crazy, and I'm just like, oh, okay, a drug or something. It actually was, but yeah. So eventually, lo and behold, I go to college. I start picking up film and media art at Temple University. Then I get a master's from Liberty University in digital content. And in the midst of this, he calls me one day, and he tells me a story, and he tells me what he just told y'all with more details. Like, we were in private. He was telling me a little more stuff, but yeah, like I just didn't know what to say. Like, he was just explaining all of this, and then explaining how he got in contact with Adrianne, and he knew that I'm into digital content and marketing and stuff like that. So he asked for my help in shining a light on this and helping with the content. So it's just like, whenever I like have to edit him or Alan talking, it's really awkward. I sit at the computer, I'm putting stuff up on the social pages and everything. I'm looking at the footage, and I'm just like, I'm like, how do I even edit this? Stuff like that happens, and it's just annoying how like there's just people who've seen justice for a lot less. He's gone through like so much more, and there's people who've like had studies done where they weren't hurt at all, like mentally or anything, but they would get a settlement for like a couple million or whatever. So people get people will it's possible. It just takes enough people to care, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, it's not fair. And yeah, it's just awkward to talk about, but it needs to be talked about, and I'm glad you guys all came, and if y'all could just, go to jonesfound09.com, just share that. Like, I think the biggest thing we need right now is exposure. So just everyone here, literally just go to jonesfound09.com. Just share that with as many people as possible, because I just don't know. Because every time I talk to this about my friend, or I talk about this to my friends, no one's heard of it, and I'm just explaining it to them. I don't go in as much detail because it's kind of like a buzzkill thing when you're around friends or whatever, But I'm just like, they're like, oh yeah, what are you doing with the so-and-so? And I'm telling them, oh yeah, I'm involved with this thing. And then it gets dark pretty fast, so I kind of pull back a little bit, But yeah, I'd like to, thank Adrianne for allowing me to be part of this too. And I didn't know that there's like a whole book about this, Acres of Skin, and a documentary. So yeah, yeah, that's about all I can say, honestly. So I'll pass it off to Adrianne.
Is it okay if I see, because I have notes? This story is so huge, you can't get it all in one. So I'm looking for my next invite. But good morning, everyone. And I want to, first of all, thank Alan for his very thorough and extensive work, because he laid the whole foundation of, he's the roadmap for us. Very thorough book, Acres of Skin and Sentence of Science. I'm very grateful for it, and my father was too. I'm thankful. Thank you, Jair. He is our graphics designer at Jones Foundation, and he does an excellent job. Awesome. And I'm thankful for Herb. Herb came about doing my advocacy work, and I've met other survivors and several family members, which I'll get into later. But like I said, we can't get this all at one time. But okay, my name is Adrianne Jones-Alston, and before I speak, I want y'all to understand something. I didn't read this story that I'm about to tell you in a textbook. I lived it. This is my life. My father, Leodus Jones, was the whistleblower on the experiments, and he signed up for the test at Holmesburg. Nobody twisted his arm. But as Alan said, the big issue is they weren't fully disclosed about what was being used in them and on them. And that's the issue. It was countless lives affected during these experiments, and I was born into the residue of injustice. When my father went into Holmesburg, before, as far back as I can remember, at 5 years old, when I started recognizing things, all I can say is these experiments affected many lives. So let me just stay in order here. I'm the oldest daughter of Leodus Jones, and I was addicted. I was incarcerated, and I don't hide my story. I was also counted out, because of their lifestyle. But I didn't die. I transformed, and I stand before you not as an advocate. Not just the daughter of Leodus Jones, a man who suffered at the hands of the unethical system, and but as a living testament to the power of resilience, truth, and the fight for justice. The Holmesburg prison experiments is a brutal chapter in American history where vulnerable men, women, senior citizens, and mentally challenged children were treated as disposable test subjects in the name of science. But let me be clear, this is not just history. The trauma of these experiments did not end when the doors of Holmesburg closed. It lives on the survivors and our families and the very fabric of the community of Philadelphia. Before my father went to prison, I remember a mild-mannered man, and I'm talking about my age, around 5 years old. He went to work, came home. I was a daddy's girl. I sat on the step every day and wait for my father's figure. to emerge at the top of the block, and I'll run up the street, and he'll put me on the shoulder, the whole daddy girl thing, barrettes flying, you know, whatever. But that was us. I remember him going away and coming back, and things were different. He was a little reserved. You know, he didn't, before he went away, we did things like, we went to block parties in Philadelphia. You know, we was the average poor working family, you know, he trying to survive. He would take us to block parties, Fairmount Park, birthday parties, you know, just, we did all that stuff. We were part of little league softball teams in the park. You know, we go meet up with family members and we'll all play, you know, while the grown-ups talked and, you know, that kind of life. But when my father went away and came back, that changed. He didn't talk and play and, you know, mess around with us, you know, little jokes and stuff. We didn't go to the parks anymore, all that stopped. And one day, I walked into the room, and his back was turned, his shirt was off. And you heard the others talk. All I saw was a back that looked like it had measles, or the pictures they showed us of monkeypox. It just looked nasty. And I was a little girl. It scared me. And when I walked in the room, I froze and I looked and I ran. You know, because I had an animated mind, and I thought, you know, because the different characteristics that my father was displaying around the house being reserved, that went from reserved to argumentative, and sometimes he would fight my mother, and those fights was ugly, and I would jump in those fights. And I'm a little kid, you know, but I was raised in Philly, and I saw the girls rumble, so I was ready to rumble. You help my mom. So anyway, you know, and that was very traumatizing for me, because when I went to school and somebody raised their voice, I swung, because that's what happened at home. So what happened to me is, as I, you know, advanced in school and I started fighting and coming into preteen, I would get suspended and, you know, problems at home. I'm wondering if my mother's okay, and, you know, and not knowing what was going on with my father. I just thought he was a monster. But anyway, my mother eventually packed us up and moved. That traumatized me even more. That was the worst thing that could have happened. I know my father was different. I know he was violent, but I didn't want to leave him. I hated my mother. You know, I didn't understand. You know, kids do that. I didn't want to be around her. I didn't want to go to school. I shut down. Going into my preteens, I ran away. I lived on the streets of Philadelphia, a young girl. I experienced a whole lot of stuff I wasn't supposed to. I slept in abandoned houses because I just didn't want to go home. I stole food to eat, to survive. I was diagnosed as being emotionally disturbed by 15. I went back home, ran away again. A guy attacked me, stabbed me in my chest, landed me in Pennsylvania hospital for 2 weeks. My family came in to get what they thought was the last view of me, because they said I wasn't going to make it. Somebody, you know, saw different. I'm still here. I went through a whole lot in my life, you know. Then I wasn't seeing my father anymore, and I'm saying all this to you guys because you hear and see the generational effects. Here's a test subject. I'm a child of a test subject. My father died 5 years ago. This is the grandchild. I have grandchildren. You know, they're interested in, just like Jair said, he's paying attention. They're paying attention. They're part of Jones Foundation. Okay, my grandson wants to go to law school. He said, Nana, and I'm gonna come back and help Jones Foundation. I was like, okay, let's do this, you know, but Holmesburg prison did not stop at that gate. It poured into the families, into the communities, and we're living proof of that. We didn't make this up. I can go into a whole lot of other things. I don't know how our time is, but I just want you guys to understand that this is a very horrible situation that happened. in the city of Philadelphia, in 3 of Philadelphia's prisons, by a very prominent organization and Big Pharma. Nobody said that, but I'm going to say it. Big Pharma, okay? So as a result of all this, back to my life, running away, being put in a girls' group home, I just was out of control. I'm not going to blame everything that happened in my childhood on the experiments, but it gave me a good damn jump start to a downward spiral in life early. From the girls' group home, living in the streets, I eventually graduated and did some other street-level crimes, landed me in prison. Just like my daddy, a recidivist. Out of control. I didn't slow down long enough to pay attention to myself till I went through a program and I met a counselor, and she talked to me, well, what's going on with you? And I was like, I don't know. She had me start writing, and I started getting into myself and started recognizing some things that I was in trouble. You know, I part of the war on drugs. I was a crack addict, so that was sprinkled on top of my issues already. You know, so I chased my tail for a long time in life. And okay, so as a result of all these stories that you guys hear, Jones Foundation started what's called Restorative Justice Initiative for the Holmesburg Prison Experiments. And right now it's a couple of schools, college universities that are involved. The $200 he talked about that I paid for his story, we ran ads and had an event at Holmesburg Prison Wall, which Alan was a part of. I didn't know him then, but we ran a campaign. We met him, a couple other survivors, and I was partnered with a professor from Howard University in Washington, and we're writing what's called the Legacy Book with the survivors and family members. All our stories is in this book. So we're working on, everybody's testimony is there. So we're putting a book together. Howard University is very active in this Restorative Justice Initiative. The professors and their students got together and helped me write the Holmesburg Prison Restorative Justice Initiative module. It's on our website. I ask you guys to please go on our website. It's a couple bucks, but like the students at Howard University, is class studies. They doing research. You know, we get ready to travel to Philly to get some work done. I would like to see you guys get active. I'm a live story. I'll come in and we could talk about it. You know, because the Restorative Justice Initiative for Holmesburg is a global project. The BBC, is that their name? The BBC is doing a 6-part podcast production. That'll be ready in November. We're working on it now, but it's a lot going on. And I, as Jair said, we need you guys to become part of this. Nobody in Jersey's doing it, but Albert Klickman came here and studied and experimented on those children. Okay, so some people say they were inmates, they deserve it. Okay, let them get the science. You know what? Okay, let's talk about the innocent ones. Let's talk about the children who didn't sign a consent form. Let's talk about the nursing homes that Albert Klickman went to and experimented on those senior citizens that probably couldn't even read any type of form or say yes or no. Took advantage of many people. And it's not a black thing. He had black people, white people, women. Did you guys hear about the tampon study? The tampon that exploded in a woman up in one of Philadelphia's prisons. She's still alive today. One of the survivors. She's part of Jones Foundation. It's a lot. Some of the test subjects, the guys are still alive, but they're up in age. You know, all the survivors are up in age, and we're getting these stories together and doing this work. But we need you guys, if you would, please become part of this Restorative Justice Initiative. I'll get with you guys, walk you through it. We can come up with what area you want to research, because it's a lot. We need a lot. England's involved. We're talking to Harvard. Howard's already in it. Oh, University of Penn groups are working with me now. The groups, not the big guys. A lot of money was made doing these experiments. Retin-A, the popular anti-aging cream, was created at Holmesburg. At Holmesburg, okay? A multi-billion-dollar product. We had over 30-something pharmaceutical companies who sent products in. We talking about perfume, I could call some names, but I'm not right now. We'll get into that. I hope you guys get involved. We have a lot to share, but my time is running out. I didn't give it all to you, but I hope I can come back and and you guys work on that module and we can break it
I
down.
want to add one more thing too.
Okay, go ahead.
She said about the Retin-A and Big Pharma. I always forget to say this part, but yeah, like in the midst of like while I'm a teenager and getting prescribed acne medicine, turns out I was prescribed Retin-A and some alternative version of it. Those are what he was experimenting. They experimented with him, on that same thing that I used for my face, and I still have some of the prescriptions as well. So it's another thing that is just bothers me. Yeah, I always forget that part, but yeah. Anyway.
Okay. All right, I'm done, guys. We'll talk more another time.